If you ever needed yet another example of why you are your own first responder and you simply cannot trust the government to protect you under virtually any set of circumstances, you just need to look at this new Uvalde report done by the United States Department of Justice and Merrick Garland, who looked at and identified countless terrible mistakes made by government law enforcement in failing to protect those students and those faculty members down there in Uvalde, Texas. A shocking report. Of course, they don't talk about arming teachers, but that's a whole different story. We'll talk about that in 1 second. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say a top 5 finalist in 2 separate categories for the 2024 Gundy's Awards, top male influencer in the Second Amendment space, and a top voice of the Second Amendment. Proud to be a finalist in both Gundy Award categories. All right, folks, this is breaking news. The United States Department of Justice has issued a 600-page report, laying out the criticisms, and that's really what it is, a massive set of criticisms of the government response, the law enforcement response to the active shooter situation that cost the lives of 21 people because some nut job decided to shoot up a school in Uvalde, Texas. And of course, the fundamental fact is, as you know, that the government is simply not going to protect you. They're simply not going to do it. They don't have a legal obligation to do it as a general matter, and they simply cannot do it even if they try to do it. You read through this report and you will absolutely see the point. In fact, what's the shocking most, and I want to get to the details of the report in 1 second, but the most shocking part of this report as I see it is that while 400 police officers showed up from 23, that's right, 400 police officers from 23 different agencies responded to the active shooter situation and showed up on the scene, these police officers, not all of them, of course, but some of them decided to knock down, apparently, according to the report, arrest, handcuff, harass, in a sense, parents that were trying to get information to protect their children. Parents that were trying to defend the children's lives, the same lives that these police officers apparently were refusing to do so. Whether out of ignorance or otherwise, they simply failed to do their job, and when the parents showed up, seeking to try to protect these kids, the police treated, as best I can tell from the way I read this report in the news reports, this is my opinion, these police officers seem to have treated the parents more aggressively than the actual psychopathic shooter. Now, you're going to draw your own lessons from that. But if law enforcement on the scene of an active shooter is treating the parents and law-abiding citizens trying to get information and trying to actually do something more aggressively than they were treating the actual shooter, well, you draw your inferences as to what that means as to how you should protect your life going forward. So let us continue on and talk about what this report said. This report, according to this report, they interviewed 260 different people, law enforcement, families, administrators, and so on, public officials. And they basically went through a list of all the different errors, of which there are so many I cannot even list them in this video. But the first thing to keep in mind is they did not treat this as an active shooter situation. In fact, they did exactly the wrong thing, as we know from Columbine, because remember, the first mass shooting in a public school was in Columbine, Colorado, and the mistake that was made out there is the police treated that as a hostage situation. So rather than going in and confronting the active shooter, they set up a perimeter in Columbine and waited for the shooters to finish their jobs before eventually they took their own lives. So the bottom line is, since Columbine, the lessons and the rules of engagement for police as a general matter have been, if there's an active shooter, you go in and confront the shooter in the same way those police officers did heroically in Nashville, where they used their AR-style firearms, M4s, whatever it was, to go in there and down that shooter in Nashville, Tennessee. That is what you do. But this is not what happened in Uvalde. Fundamental mistake. Now, there's some discussion here as the reason why they did this may have been due to a mistake or errors in training they had recently received, and that may have contributed to why they made this wrong decision to not immediately confront the bad guy. Now, I should note that Attorney General Merrick Garland said that the law enforcement response was a failure that should not have occurred. Their loved ones deserve better. Thank you, Attorney General Merrick Garland. You're the same exact person that is going out there every single day and trying to stop parents and other people from protecting their own lives with firearms, because we're supposed to trust the same government officials, the same law enforcement folks that failed in their duty at Uvalde. Can you not connect these dots, Merrick? Come on, you're smarter than that. I know you're smarter than that. You know you're smarter than that. Connect the dots the right way and stop being a political propagandist for the anti-gun movement. You cannot write a 600-page report by the United States Department of Justice under your oversight that says that police simply failed 6 ways to Sunday in protecting those people down there in Uvalde, and simultaneously in other cases in this country trying to deprive people the ability to defend themselves when the police officers refuse and or cannot do it. Connect the dots. Connect the dots. This is not that hard. I know you're smart, Merrick Garland. I know you're smart. What's very interesting is, according to this Wall Street Journal, I'll put a link to the Wall Street Journal article down below, but there's a bunch of people reporting on this, not just the Journal. According to the Journal, they say that once inside the school, there were actually 11 officers who had first responded, including the police chief down there, Arredondo, but apparently the Uvalde police acting chief, Mariano Pargas, he retreated from the entry into the adjoining classrooms where the shooter gunned down victims. And then they waited for more than an hour before entering the rooms, even as children inside called 911, and shots continued to be fired inside. So it seems as if there was a refusal or failure to go into the rooms to confront this shooter. And again, they essentially set up a perimeter. They also said that, the Uvalde School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo failed to establish, according to the report at least, he did not establish a command center, and also there were radios that were left behind, so they communicated only verbally or by cell phone. I don't quite understand how you're responding to an active shooter situation and not everyone on the ground as law enforcement doesn't have radios. That seems kind of odd to me, but apparently that was the case. And Chief Justice, and accordingly to the report, Chief Arredondo also focused on evacuating the rest of the school, which should not have delayed, according to the report, confronting the shooter. They should have immediately gone in there and confronted the shooter, but they did not. It's what's terrible about this is the interesting point, that in addition to failing to go in rapidly and to protect these kids and these faculty members, the victims were trapped with a gunman for over an hour as the police remained outside. What's going on with that? Now, of course, set aside the fact that why wasn't this schoolhouse locked? Right? Keep in mind that the shooter in Uvalde just entered an open door. There were no locks. Why don't we start with a recommendation that says, lock the door? Lock the door. Of course, the other recommendation should be lock the door, single point of entry, metal detectors at the front door, and armed guards, and then allow administrators and teachers to carry guns if they're so willing. I mean, how do you have a school in Texas that's entirely defenseless to some nut job that probably could have been gunned down in a heartbeat if there was a CCW carrier in that school? Nevertheless, apparently this was so terrible that when the Border Patrol tactical team, which is the one that finally took down the shooter, the killer, the shooter had literally written LOL, laugh out loud presumably, LOL on the classroom whiteboard in the victim's blood. Now, how do you give these psychopaths enough time to do stuff like this and to play games? They need to be dead on the spot. You need to confront these people and kill these people. That is your job as law enforcement. And again, the reality is, whether by mistake or otherwise, we in America cannot trust the government to protect ourselves. Look, you cannot trust the government to protect yourself if you're in Israel and you have essentially a security state in Israel where you have the IDF and you have Mossad. They make movies about these folks, about how great and heroic and great they are, and they are pretty good, about all this intelligence services over there in Israel. Great, fantastic. And despite the fact you have a security state of Israel with infinite amount of security and protections and all sorts of things, they can't even protect over 1,000 people from an attack by Hamas. It just goes to show you the inherent shortcomings of government all across this great country and all across this globe. This is why the Founding Fathers gave us, among other reasons, the Founding Fathers ensured that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, to thwart all forms of tyranny. That tyranny could be in the form of a drug gang. It could be in the form of a street criminal. It could be in the form of a tyrannical government. It could be in the form of a domestic insurrection. It could be in the form of a foreign invader. It could be in the form of an animal attack. Tyranny in all of its forms is the purpose of the Second Amendment, to thwart that. And there was tyranny, a war against civilization that occurred in 2022 down in Uvalde, Texas, and the government, as per usual, did not save lives, because the old unfortunate cliche that says when seconds count, police are minutes away holds true. And in the case of Uvalde, according to this report, when seconds counted, police were over an hour away. They weren't over an hour away. They were on the scene. They just weren't coming in to save the kids. So I'll put a link to it down below. Take a look at the results of the reports and the news reporting, and you'll let me know if you agree with what I have to say here. And again, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your support. Don't forget to follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner, and we'll see you again soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.